Hello.
Hello.
How many people here have ever been tempted to customise a transformer? Quite a few of you. Good, good. How many people have actually done it? Okay. Are you doing the whole priming and spraying? And
I do sometimes, but I also do shapeways stuff.
yes.
Model it myself actually.
Cool, cool. I'm not into the actual modelling, physical modelling of it, but I know how to paint and stuff like that. That's what we're going through today. The subject matter is a Combiner Wars first aid, turning it into a more than meets the eye crankcase with a shapeways head. So first things first, we'll probably talk about is rub points. So I've got the figure in here. It's already partially painted, so that hopefully we can get it finished in this section. So yeah, it's all painted, mostly ready to go. What I mean by rub points is where plastic moves against plastic during the transformation or during using articulation. So for example, if I pick out one of the legs, right there, while I've painted it with gunmetal, the red's showing through. That's because it's rubbing through where that is. This is only a quick job. I've not properly primed and everything on this, just to give you an idea of how a finished figure could look. Finished still looks nice, so hopefully, hopefully we're in business. So first little tip is prime. You can get all sorts of different primes. You can get black, you can get white, you can get grey. Depending on what colour you're going to paint over the top of it, determines what kind of paint you should use as the undercoat. So, for instance, if you're doing a metallic colour like silver or a gold, you want a black undercoat because that backs up the colour and makes it look that much brighter. Whereas if you're doing fluorescent paint like a neon green or pink like on Generation 2 Mirage, then you want a white background. Does that make sense? Because if you put a black one on that, the colour won't show. The white brightens it up. Now, here we've got one of the upper arms. I'm just going to quickly show you how to spray paint that. A little tip that I've picked up, I've one of those skewers. This can be quite hard, and the blue paint is to use kebab skewers. That's unorthodox, but it saves you having to get little bits of paint on your hands or bits where you haven't been able to spray it. If you stick it through an unknown point, hardly you're not going to see, like inside a joint area or anything like that, because you don't really want to get paint inside there. Because so many customs I've done where it's ended up clogged with paint, say for example on this ironhide. This ironhide I did about 15 years or so ago. It's pretty poor. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. It's hand painted by brush with enamel paint. It was just a case of, oh, I want to paint this into this colour. Just paint in the pot and just doused it in it basically, and you can tell. Whereas if you go all the way to the bottom, and the pyro, which is the latest one I've just done, finished on commission, the paintwork is smooth, it matches the plastic, really good finish on it. So anyway, the trick with, and this is where the spraying comes in, the trick is short bursts of paint. So, it's shaking. Oh, what is this? I need to do that. So if you hold it still, just short bursts. Now, it may not look like much, but you want small, thin layers of paint like that. So, very thin, short bursts, like not continuous stream of paint, but just the occasional, then you'll get a good finish. Bit of a hurry here, so just get that done. Okay. I've got another arm here to spray, but I won't do that just to save you lungs. What else? Shapeways. Talk about shapeways plastic now. I've got this one of what I'm talking about. There are different kinds of plastic you can get for shapeways. So, for example, you can get white, strong and flexible polished, which is good for parts. This is a spare chest plate for a pyro that I'm completing for myself. It's nice and smooth, only needs a little bit of sanding and then it'll be prepped for painting. You can get the unpolished version, which is like on this pyro head, It's a lot rougher in texture, it will need sanding, otherwise when you paint it, you'll be able to tell what it is, but the detail won't be there. In the case of crankcase, I have got a frosted ultra detail head. Now, the thing with the frosted ultra detail is kind of transparent. Really nice quality on it, but it has a sort of waxy sheen to it. The trick is to get that off. A bit of isopropyl alcohol, or rubbing alcohol. Some people use acetone, which is nail varnish remover, and just dunk it in for a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, and then take it out. Any longer than that, it will interfere with how the plastic is formed and the chemical structure of it, and then you'll just end up with a blob otherwise. And nobody wants that, not unless that's what you're going for anyway. But it's the same method for painting heads. Undercoat the colour that you want, and then build upon that. In the case of faces, you'll want to do some masking. Personally, I use frog tape, which is really, really good for customs. I mean, a lot of people use it for decorating, that's what you're supposed to use it for. But if you take frog tape and apply it over the parts that you don't want visible, or that you don't want painting a certain colour, it will protect it. And the important thing, the reason I like this brand is because it is low tack. So if you've got a painted surface, say the head is already painted blue, and then you cover it with frog tape, it will come off without disturbing the paint underneath it. Because a lot of masking tapes, or cell tapes as I used when I first started out, it will take the paint off with it. So that's a good tip. Right, removing paint applications from toys. Who knows what this is? Jazz. Yes.
POCP.
Oh, Power of the Prime Jazz. With the famous, horrible little thing on it.
Yeah.
Shall we fix that? Got a little bit of rubbing alcohol here. It's not isopropyl, but it's surgical alcohol that I got from Boots. It does the same thing. It's got the same high alcohol content.
What is the percentage of the alcohol?
The percentage of alcohol in this one is 90%.
Okay.
So it's still quite strong. I still would recommend against submerging pieces in it, because I did have a jazz that I previously turned into knockout. Dumped the entire front chest of it in to get the paint off, and the hinge disintegrated. So while I have a very nice looking knockout, it can't transform without removing the head.
No.
Knockout's got a head master. No, it wouldn't work, because the entire hinge disintegrated. So no way of actually salvaging the piece, unfortunately. But we can remove that little paint application. So what I recommend for that is cotton buds, or Q-tips. You only need a little bit, and a lot of elbow grease. So, and it's reusable, which is good. Well, I reuse it anyway, probably shouldn't. So that paint application there, the little Autobot symbol, just take the Q-tip and just rub. It does take some elbow grease and a little bit of time, but if you look, it's already started to come away at the top. So continue with that. I've got rid of the Autobot symbol and not the actual offensive logo there.
Sam, if you're using that and then you've kind of finished doing what you need to do,
Yes.
does it have a residual quality to it so it affects the paint going on top of it, or do you have to kind of...
I would recommend washing it lightly in water, just rinsing off that alcohol. As you can see, the logo's gone. Completely gone, no trace that it was even there. If you touch it, there's not even the feel. I do recommend removing paint apps from toys that you're going to paint, because, especially in the case of some tampographs, so for example on Lugnut, I knew the reason brought these. On Lugnut, he had writing on the wings. spelling his name. Yeah, you can't make it out, but it's still there. You can still see the imprint of where that paint tap was, just because, well, it's still there. If you remove it, then you won't see it once you put the paint on top of it. No amount of priming or anything like that will stop that showing through unless you remove the paint tap.
It's slightly raised, isn't it, as well? So
Yeah.
that's why it'll show through.
Yeah, I think. Don't know whether the lighting's right, but you can actually see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's removing paint. Tightening joints. Fall over. Talk about tightening joints next. You can use nail polish. Clear nail polish is usually good. Games Workshop hard coat is really good. But one thing that I'm just going to put this alcohol away,
Yeah.
lest I spill it.
And get everyone drunk.
Never waste alcohol. Never.
I don't want to talk about how it is.
This is floor polish. You may have heard about this online. This is the Pledge. The one that you're looking for, known as Clear. It smells nice as well. It sounds really, really bizarre to be using floor polish on your toys, but it's water-based. So there's absolutely no problem with using it. Yes?
Isn't it right that if you use things like Superglue and nail polish, it tends to warp and chemically
It also
degrade it?
Yeah.
Whereas that, it just kind of sticks.
This sticks, and it smells nice.
Yeah, almost like a rubber coating.
Yeah. So
Thinking about the plastic one, would be too bad either.
How much
Yeah.
does friction kind of reduce the effectiveness of that over time? So,
it wears down over time. It's not a permanent fix. Being water-based, you can wear it off. There is a little bit of residue as well at times. But the figure I've brought in to show this is Mech Ideas Gauntlet. The little IDW Iron Fist that they did a few years ago. Try not to think about how long ago that was actually, because it makes me feel old. Yeah, really nice little representation of the figure, the character. I have custom painted the face on this one to make him look more like the Iron Fist we all know and love. But the problem with this one, no, it's not that arm, it's this arm. So nice and normal, forward, certain angles, just drops.
That's actually been very common with a lot of Hasbro figures as of late, haven't they?
Yeah.
Loose joints.
Yes. So ball joints, so you can actually see how loose that is there. Ball joints, what you can do is just remove it, dunk it in a little bit of solution, and leave it to dry. In about 10 minutes or so that'll be dry and it'll be a nice tight joint. One other thing I was going to talk about, I haven't got a Masterpiece Dino Bot, so I can't actually show you, but loosening joints is a similar principle. This is shock oil. It's a silicone-based oil, lubricant that's used for model cars, like RC cars. So, and again, it does, because it's plastic, it doesn't alter the chemical structure. So if you like to use WD-40 or something like that, you can expect a puddle of a figure. Whereas if you use this, the plastic will remain the same, they'll just give it a bit more give and free them to move. Yes?
Although it probably wouldn't last as long, couldn't you also use something like olive oil?
Won't olive oil make it more slippery?
Which is what you want.
Yeah,
If you're loosening joints,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Olive oil could work, but
Again, it's very, very short term.
Yes.
It wouldn't last.
you only want to use the smallest amount anyway, regardless. So use a teeny tiny amount on the end of a cocktail stick, and then work it into the joint of the figure. I didn't actually bring the figure down to show that on. Oh, I did. I brought Cheetor down to show that on, because his pins on his shoulders can be quite tight. I have known of people who have broken the Cheetor on that butterfly joint that moves in and out. It's also needed for transformation, so there's a lot of people who've broken their Cheetors trying to transform it. If you get a little bit of the lubricant on a cocktail stick and just work it into the joint. So around the pinhead, drop it in there, work the joint around, get it all in there, moving about. It should relieve any of the tension and just make it easy to move. So at this point, that's dry to the touch. That's the advantage of acrylic paint over enamel paint. I used to paint with enamel paints. Ones that I brought in that are enamel painted are Ironhide, and I've also got Turbo Master Flash, circa 2009, that I enamel painted. As you can see, there's a lot of brush strokes.
Is that a Botcon version?
No.
Oh, not a Botcon.
No. There wasn't a Botcon Flash. Never got any of the Botcon ones, unfortunately. But after, I did find that with enamel paint, I didn't need to prime quite as much. But whether that was just my technique at the time or what, I couldn't tell you. But I have had customs that I painted with enamel paint, where the paint went on, and then after a week, it was still sticky to the touch. I couldn't reassemble the toy because I was still waiting for it. Whereas this, only in a matter of minutes, it's not going anywhere. It's nice and secure.
What's the makeup of the paints you're using now?
Paints that I'm using here are the Citadel ones, the Games Workshop ones. So Chaos Black and...
What's the kind of main, if they're not enamel paints, what are they kind of based around?
they're acrylic. Enamels are based around oil, acrylics are based around water. But I should reiterate, if you're going to be painting with acrylic paint, make sure it's specific model paint as opposed to the kind that you would paint on the canvas. Because if I come to Leo's app over here, made from the Power of the Prime Star screen with shape bits, if I come down here, even though I've spray painted it, primed it and everything, if I was to continuously rub with my finger, the paint would come off.
Are you not varnishing it?
I have varnished it.
You have varnished it?
Mm-hmm.
What varnish you use?
It's the Citadel.
Is it the old Citadel?
I think so. So that's probably it then.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still better to use genuine model paint. I mainly use Citadel, but recently I've moved on to using Vallejo?
Vallejo.
Vallejo. I wasn't sure of the pronunciation, thank you. And there's a much better finish. You can see that on the Power of the Prime stakeout I've done, on the chest and the head, or on the, in fact, probably better example is the yellow and the red on Pyro. Yellow is a notoriously horrible colour to paint. So the trick with that is undercoat. White on the bottom, and then build up from there. With lighter colours like your yellows and whites and the like, it's important to use a darker undercolour first. I know it sounds strange to put a dark colour on before you put a light colour on, but if you're painting a colour yellow when it was originally blue, if you put the dark colour on and then a white colour on, it's not going to show through the blue underneath or turn it green.
Yeah, what would you... My first custom was with paint pens, like those
Yes.
Epping paint pens. What do you really think about those?
I think that paint pens are more for detailing as opposed to full figures.
Okay. Yeah, that's really what you use them for.
Yes. It's the same sort of basis. Like, if you're just filling in cracks or panel lining or whatever, you can do that. You can also use washes, put it on and then rub it onto the miniature kitchen roll.
Yeah.
Sam, can I just add something about what you were saying about enamel paint?
Yes.
I used enamel paint on a Generations Blitzwing, and the nose cone is like a rubber. Months after, it still is tacky.
Yeah.
So don't
That
put
will be-
enamel paint on rubber.
That would be the rubberised plastic. Rubberised plastic is horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible for painting, I should reiterate. It saved a lot of people's eyes. But it is horrible for painting. So there's not really a whole lot you can do about it other than maybe dyeing it. I don't know anything about dyeing.
Yeah.
But I have people use dyes to good effect. You can prime it. Most primers will adhere to it, but it's not recommended. I think, I had an Age of Extinction Scorn that I was going to repaint blue. I put some primer on, some polyurethane primer, polyurethane, plastic, disintegrated. No good. Yes. Sorry, I'm babbling a bit. Yeah. With Shapeways parts, here's the crankcase head that I did previously. This was the first one I got. Frosted ultra detail, like the one I showed you earlier. Tried to put it on the figure, broke in half. With this kind of plastic, it's always good to just be aware of where the weak points are. It's like if there are any points where you could put something in order to... No, just be careful with it. If it feels like it's going to break when you're forcing it, maybe lubricate the ball joint before you put it in. It's easier to loosen that joint just to get it on and then tighten it up once it's on, rather than having a broken face. I mean, it's crankcase, so it's supposed to have a broken face, but I don't think it's supposed to be quite that broken.
Or avoid heads that are all one piece.
Yeah.
Is there also a choice of plastic where you do all these shapeways parts as well?
Yes, there is a choice of shapeways plastic. Like I mentioned, at the moment there is the... can't remember what they're called, but it used to be white, strong and flexible. They've changed it to something else now.
It's versatile now.
White versatile plastic.
Yeah, white versatile.
Yeah. It's good for things like joints, it's good for stuff that's going to take an impact.
Yeah.
So for example, this pyro head, if I dropped it, I can do that and there will be absolutely zero fear of anything having broken off. Whereas a high detail plastic, like I think it's frosted high detail at the moment.
Yeah.
This is a spare one that I painted and then the hinge broke when I tried to apply it to the figure. If I drop that, there's a chance that some parts may break off. Or if you even try to fit it on the joint will break.
Okay. Another thing you could use is that the new option of that is professional plastic.
Yes.
They've had that. I've actually built a kit for a first edition Optimus Prime.
Yes.
I think it was made by Ariel Lemon.
Ariel's Customs.
Yeah, Ariel's Customs.
Yeah, just good work.
I actually messaged him on, I think it was yesterday actually, he's put on professional plastic, and the way I've seen some people use it, the way I think some people could use it, it kind of replaces the alamide, the metallic plastic, so I think that's
okay. The plastic that I really like to use from Shapeways was one that they've just recently discontinued, the high definition black acrylite.
Acrylite, yeah. Black acrylite.
Yeah, you can see that on Steakhouse chest plate here. It wasn't that great for bigger pieces, because I did see some people print some stuff in the material and then it would break. Or, well, it would be warped as it printed. So as it printed, it would warp and it would distort and then it wouldn't be fit for purpose. With smaller pieces like chest plates or heads, it was an absolutely beautiful product. But Leozak's head is made out of that same material. That's the black HD acrylite. It's like, it is possible to chip bits off it, so I wouldn't recommend dropping it, but I never had a figure break or a piece break from that. So that's why I brought in an acrylite crankcase head that I found. I didn't know I still had it. But any questions at the moment? Yes?
Yeah, I bought a Combiner Wars Leopardizer a while ago, and the going look, at the combiner joint, it was really loose. Do you have any fixes for that?
Combiner Wars joints.
Yeah, the ratchet joint then.
Yeah, they are a little ratchet joint. I didn't bring one of those with me today, but was it the actual movement, the ratchet itself was really weak,
Yeah,
or was it the knees?
it was the actual thing. It was just really weak. When I put it on it, his arm just slid inwards and he can't close properly.
What you could do, well, is it the in and out movement or is it the rotation?
It's the in and out movement.
The in and out movement. Best way to get to that is on a lot of the Combiner Wars figures, there's a screw that goes in to that part, if you get a long nose screwdriver, tighten that joint up, that should bring the tension back into it for you. How are we doing for time?
Sam, sorry, are there any colours that you simply can't paint into another colour? So if you had a figure that you really want to turn into whatever sort of base colour was completely wrong, is there any cancer anything like that? It's not doable?
I've encountered that in the past with things like wanting to paint white or yellow and stuff like that. But in recent years, since I started using the acrylic paint and started priming, I've not really had that problem. If we refer to my previous customs, Impactor here wasn't primed. The gold was, but the purple wasn't. And you can tell that the blue, the original blue, is still visible. And that's discrepancy between the two. With priming, like I did on Luglook here, you can very rarely see it. Like I say, white and yellow are usually the worst figures to paint. This farmer here is based on Titan's Return, Trigger Happy. I think I've done all right on it. So in that case, black paint, lightly sanding, white paint on top, multiple layers, like I talked about earlier, and it's all right. Yeah?
Yeah, with the frosted heads, how do you get a solid look out of that, or can you not do it?
Solid look?
Yeah, almost, so you know how it's slightly translucent?
Yes.
So how can you get it to seem like a solid bit of plastic? Or can you
Is this a problem that you've had with some paints, or?
No, but I have, because I haven't actually used the frosted stuff, but I'm just, can you paint it like any other plastic? Or?
Yes. So, I do mean to paint this and then you're free to prime and then go on to your actual colours,
Okay.
as if you would any other.
Okay.
I've had the same result with fairy liquid.
Pardon?
I've had the same result with a bit of fairy liquid and some warm water.
That's probably better then.
Yeah.
Always go for, like, if there's an easier option like fairy liquid or something like that, go for that.
Yeah.
Because it'll be mild plastic.
Have you ever
Yeah.
have you ever had problems with your Titan Return Triptychon with the hip?
Yes.
One of the best tips to actually loosen. I've heard so many.
There's several different ways. When it first came out, people were talking about, oh, the spring needs cutting. Don't cut the spring. The problem with Triptychon is, and Bobby will vouch for this because I fixed his last year, the spring was far too taut. It hadn't been worked in or anything like that. Triptychon is so easy to take apart. It's very easy to spatchcock like you would a chicken. You just remove all the screws and then just completely falls to bits. If you remove the screws to get on the hip bits, to get to the ratchet joint, take the spring, that's the word, take the spring out and then just stand on it and just gently...
Stand?
Yeah.
It seems odd, but
Stand on it, work on it for about 20 minutes.
you can do the same thing.
Like you were blowing up an airbed, like that.
You can do the
Just
same
do
stuff with like Nerf guns as well. Like,
Yes.
I'm sure a couple of people.
Yeah, and it's the same principle with the tail. If you take the tail, well, I would advise actually gluing part of the tail, because there's different screw mechanisms, something like that. I have done a guide for that on the TF.W boards. It's all a case of the springs not being worked. If you bed the springs in, it'll move no problem. Yeah. Has anyone had any problems with toys? Yes.
Do you have any particular technique for removing pins? Because some of them are stupidly difficult.
They are. Pins are always a problem. I have removed pins on this crankcase in order to do this custom. Oh, that's a loose joint right there. But what you want to do with pins is, if you can avoid removing them, don't. And just mask off around the areas that you don't want to paint, if that makes sense. But if you really, really have to remove a pin, work out which direction the pin has gone in. You can usually tell because the side where the pin has gone in, I can just get him transformed. There's usually a little bit of embellishment around the pin. It's like the pin won't have gone all the way through to the other side. There will be a little bit of damage to the plastic on the outside. If you hit it from the side where it looks clean, it won't move. If you hit it from the other side with a pin punch or another pin, then you might be able to move it. The ones that are a real because pins have two edges to them. There's usually there's a smooth bit, and then at one of the ends there's a notched end. The notched end is what keeps it in place and stops it from moving. If you hit it from the end that isn't, and you can manage to get the notched end out, then you'll be able to get a pair of pliers and just remove it.
Yeah.
Flat-headed pins are more of a problem. You can use the same method, where if you go to the rear of it, then you can push it through, or you can get a soldering iron. Soldering iron on the head of the pin for about 30 seconds, and grab the part that's been attached to and pull, and it should come away without damaging the plastic. The last figure I did that on was stakeout here, because the base of this figure was a Combiner Wars prowl, but I didn't really. If you can avoid painting figures, avoid painting, just part swap. So the blue limbs, the hands, the upper arms, and most of the assembly is actually from a smokescreen, because he had the blue part. If you can avoid painting, then I will. The part that I actually removed, that I had to remove in order to do the part swap, and you can see that it's actually prowl, is that pin there. Now there's no easy access to the pin because of where it is. So, easiest way forward is angle yourself correctly, put the soldering iron on the pin, heat it for 30 seconds, try pulling, it should come away. 40 seconds, 40 to 50 seconds, it should definitely come away. The pin should come away with the top part as opposed to just ripping the entire figure apart. I didn't do that with the smokescreen, unfortunately, so it's unusable. And it is very, very easy to catch the plastic. So on stakeout here, there is a little bit of white showing where the soldering iron just nicked him. Yeah?
One thing you could also do, and again, I haven't done it myself, but I know others who have. If you don't want to get a soldering iron in your figure, which is completely understandable,
Yes.
You can get, they're like a couple of bucks on a couple of quid on Amazon, you get specific pin pushers where all you need is that and a hammer.
Yes. They are very good kits. They are very good pieces of kit. I would highly recommend getting a pin pusher if you're planning to remove pins, especially if you're going to use the hammer method. But some it's not some figures it's not possible. Like on stakeout, you can see the pin on one side, the flat side where it's been pushed in, but on the other side it's completely concealed behind plastic. So you'd either have to drill a hole in order to get to the pin, or just use a soldering iron on it. It's like, it seemed to work all right.
If you're going to be removing pins as well, it's worth Googling the specific figure beforehand,
Yes.
because there's some known production issues.
Yeah.
Because I've been trying to remove the pins from Transformers Prime Ratchet
Yeah.
from the knees, and they can't be removed.
Yeah.
And
It's
everybody says
intrinsic
the
to the
same
figure as well.
Yeah.
It's some pins is impossible to remove, and some figures it is not worth removing the pin. Classic example of this is on the Combiner Wars jet mode, like Guidehog. It's not worth removing the knees on the pins if you're going to be removing the legs. Just like go further down. Never remove a joint that's got a functional use like a knee, because otherwise you just end up with really wobbly knees. And then you have to thicken the joints. So if you can avoid doing something, and there's a different way to do it, generally go for that.
Ever encountered strip threads?
Strip threads,
Yeah.
strip screws.
Yeah.
Strip screws.
I lost 2 brawns through that.
I've not had to deal with that myself, so I don't want to give you bad advice, but I have heard people using super glue and screwdrivers.
One thing I have done, because I have actually had this nearly lost a combinable cyclones. Is an elastic band, as it allows you to get a lot more of a grip.
So put the elastic in and then use that as a...
and then just use it as a grip.
Yeah,
Of course, you need
probably.
to get quite a thick elastic band, otherwise it's just going to go through.
Yeah, okay.
Well, like put the elastic down on the
Yeah.
Right. At this point, I'm going to try and assemble the crankcase, just to give you an idea of how finished product figure could look, if that makes sense. I haven't fully painted all of the parts. I don't want to gas you all with spray paint. So, you will still have white arms, but actually painting joints, sometimes it can add a bit more friction. It's not advisable though. If you've got moving parts, generally you want to avoid, because if I keep doing that, moving the joint around, you can already see some of the red plastic showing through. It's certainly for me, a personal question.
Same thing applies with like Nerf guns again.
Yeah. One thing I would like to talk to you about is masking. I've already mentioned masking tape, but for some small areas it is impossible to get the masking tape into the correct position, whether it's, say, the small contours of a face. It's like the crankcase head is a solid piece. It's not possible to remove the face and just paint that separately. So in that case, what I would recommend is priming the entire thing and then masking it off. Masking tape isn't useful in that kind of scenario, so I tend to use blue tack. It sounds strange using blue tack as a mask, but you can get some really good results from it. Miyazaki here, his head is one solid piece.
Who's that? Tool from?
Power of the Prime Star Screen. So, new feet, new chest, new head. Head is one solid piece. There's no other part to it. So, prime it, blue tack over the area where you don't want the other colours of paint, and then just go for it.
The other problem models I found with doing that is around the edge of it. You tend to get like a little raised edge of paint, whereas the blue tack's done.
Yes,
So it's a bit of,
that's why I always recommend using as small amount of blue tack as possible. It's an unorthodox method. I should have probably said this at the start, but I'm not a professional. I still consider myself an amateur. I've been doing it a fair amount of years, but I would never call myself a professional. It's just to help some of you guys out there look at, see some painting techniques, see some of the results that you can get, and go on from there. Yes?
Masking fluid.
Masking fluid.
Artist's blue masking fluid. I've only just started with Transformers, but I do a lot of other modifications.
Yeah.
And the masking fluid is absolutely fantastic. You don't get the raised edge that you would normally get because it's designed for this job.
I need to get some of that.
Yeah.
Like, I never go somewhere thinking, oh yes, I know everything. Like, I came in here thinking, oh, I know everything. I'm going to tell all these people how to make a fantastic custom, and I'm not wrong, or blah blah. I'm always willing to learn. Always learn from your mistakes, and be willing to accept other things or try new things. So
I've had the opposite with masking fluid, so you can have mine. I mashed with it and it was horrific. So yeah, I mean I'm cat-handed, but
yeah, yes.
Well, this is sort of more of a asking for advice thing. I've got a G1 rim lock, and he's on. It was the first transform I got, and his joints. He's got some rusty screws and stuff. Is there any way to safely get the rust off? It's not going to damage anything.
Can you remove the screws?
I probably can, yeah.
How about WD-40?
Not while don't put WD-40 on it while the screws are still in the figure. You know the answer, I'm guessing.
White vinegar.
Yeah. White vinegar.
White vinegar.
Keeps it a
Ah,
bit
okay.
on. That keeps it, take it out, yeah.
Coca-Cola clean off rust as well.
Coca-Cola.
yeah, it's sticky though.
It does sound really, really sticky Coca-Cola, so then you'd end up having to wash it off anyway. And then the screw would re-rust because of the water that you've put on it to rinse it off. Yes?
Chrome on top of it.
I'll come to you next.
I'm going to doing custom weaponry.
Yes.
And the one piece that always seems to stun me is when it comes to getting a plastic rod for the handles. Because I've been to a few suppliers out of 5mm dials and they don't fit the hands.
Right.
Then they end up getting 4mm and they're too small. And the only ones that seem to go for are, usually, you want to get them black, obviously, just so that they'll not be any paint wear. But I always find myself ending up getting white 4.8 mils. Do you know any others where you could find stuff of a different color, a darker colour?
I'm afraid
because
not.
always ends up sticking out.
It's not something that I've had to deal with myself. But what you could do is if you get the smaller size, build it up with clear nail polish or with floor polish or what have you. Build it up so that you get the right thing, and then you should be okay with it.
You can also, if you're willing to pay for it, you can get them through shapeways easily enough. Literally, you can model it in really anything, and it is precision designed for that.
Yeah.
I guess friction teams work well for hands, as long as they're back on the whatever numbers.
One other thing I should probably talk to you about is hand painting. Who hand paints with brushes? Yeah. I don't need to tell you how to do this. Crankcase here, I've hand painted the windscreens. A lot of the figures on the table are hand painted as well. Farmer was sprayed white, but then the details were painted on with custom decals kindly provided by Jamesy on Twitter. Lugnut is fully hand painted, so we'll refer to him. So, as you would with spray paint, you don't want to put too much paint on at once. It's very, very easy to put too much paint on the figure. Just like dump your brush and then just go straight to it. Less is more. So, a little bit of paint on the brush. And who here has seen Bob Ross? I find that the happy little crisscross action can provide a good finish. And you don't see the brush marks quite as much as you would. If you paint all in one solid direction, you're going to see the brush marks. If you vary the direction in which you paint, you're going to be alright. You're not going to see those brush marks. And I have had people comment on an earlier version of this Lugnut, which had about 2 or 3 more coats of paint, so don't judge it on this one, that he thought it was sprayed when it had been hand painted, just because I'd taken the time with it and made sure that I painted in alternate directions, sort of building it up as if it was a canvas. Yes, I said it.
If you, obviously you've said you have no experience with dyes.
Yes.
For me, it's less a question, more a statement, really. The best dye you can use, if you are going to use it, would be Ritz dye.
Yes.
Obviously, the thing is, it's like with paint. There are some colours that you just can't work with. Like you can't.
Yeah, you'd never be able to dye a dark blue figure white. It doesn't work like that.
No, honestly, you just get a light blue. If you do white dye, you just get a light blue figure.
Yeah.
That is. Yeah. So, and best thing, honestly, I'd say would be to do, if you can get it off, would be a translucent part. That's the best way to do it. That's the best thing to dye.
Yeah. Unless you dye it black. If you dye it black, you can take any figure and you can dye it black.
Yeah, and honestly,
you can always dye darker, but you can't dye lighter.
That's about right. A lot of you have probably seen this. If you go on to guy by the name of Paul, goes by the name Optimus.
Yes.
There's a video of a custom FE Nemesis Prime, and that's all dyed, and that looks absolutely fantastic if you want to see results of dyeing.
Yeah. Yes.
Excellent question. When you're hand painting your figures, how do you deal with bristle loss? Like, what brushes would you use, or do you still get that as an issue?
I still occasionally come across that. Buying new brushes regularly is the only way to get around that really. If you start to notice that your bristles are getting a bit frayed, I found that sometimes this isn't really what you should do, but I found that sometimes spraying it with a little bit of varnish helps clump it all back together and then just get it to a sharp point. For detailed brushes, for fat brushes, for painting large areas, if you start to lose bristles, I'd just stop using that brush and throw it away.
Do you ever use an airbrush?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for a compressor?
My compressor came... It was part of a cheap kit.
So was mine, and it's overheated because it wouldn't run continuously for long enough that I needed it.
Yeah, that's my compressor there. It's only a little thing, it's not that powerful, but you don't really need it to be too powerful.
I'll just say about airbrushes at the moment, if you go onto Aldi on their website, they've got an airbrush and compressor set for 64 quid, which is about as cheap as you're going to get a compressor for.
I would recommend though, while the compressor might be good for that, I would recommend looking at getting a better airbrush.
Yeah.
Because it's always the case of buy cheap, buy twice.
Yeah.
So this airbrush cost me about 50 quid when it came out. I think it's about 70 or so now. But it wants to make quality products. I've only had to replace one part of it and I've had it for about 5 years. So you get what you pay for essentially. Yeah?
I have an old G1 Prime that's chrome is flaking on it, it's the smokestacks. Is there any way I could restore the chrome on it?
There has been a thing that came out recently, the chrome pens. The chrome pens, I thought I have one here.
I've got a couple of things, Sam, if you want one.
You can get chrome pens. They are really good for little touch-ups. That's like that.
Yeah, it's basically a paint pen but with chrome. You've got
You wouldn't use it on large areas. Large areas, again, you'd want to get something else.
Nothing if I use it.
I'll be honest, I don't. I'll be perfectly honest. I
No,
don't know.
it takes a while to cure. If you use it sparingly, then it should look good.
I think
But one thing I could say for fat metallized plastic, like transmetal figures, they are infamously famous for losing their chrome after a certain amount of time. If you use varnish on it, it can dull the finish. But I found with the floor polish, it doesn't matter the finish. It dries clear, it's still quite reflective. So if it's fat metallized, it is possible to preserve it, just using some sort of product on it, whether it's hairspray or something like that. Don't come to me if it goes wrong then. Yeah, anyone else? Yeah?
I'd like to start personalising. I was wondering if you had any recommendations for some cheap figures on the other ones.
Cheap figures, generally what's available.
Cyberverse.
Cyberverse isn't that cheap, I don't think. If you see figures on cheap, then that's usually a good place to start, like a clearance section or something like that. I would recommend starting on the smaller figures, so like Legion class or Commander class or something like that, because then you can get used to the painting techniques and the like. Yeah. Yeah. The less moving parts, the better generally. But some figures are easier to repaint than others. Say, for example, a Generation 1 Mirage. Generation 1 toy. Nice and simple. Only a few moving parts. Take it apart, and there's so much to the inside of it. It's like there's die-cast parts, there's plastic parts, there's chrome parts, and each of them are individual little parts. So many little pieces, all held together by screws that you don't realise until you start.
Do you find, sorry to interrupt, do you find, obviously looking at Generation 1 figure,
Yes.
that the older materials, have you encountered a difference in material, say in something newer, like the Leo's app, in terms of using your modern paints?
In plastic quality, I have noticed that the power of the prime figures are a lot thinner. They're a lot less robust than they used to be. Using Mirage as an example, I had absolutely no problem with the plastic. I had no fear it was going to break or anything like that, whereas I have had some figures crack as I'm trying to move them. Good example. I've actually got an example. Right. Is Farmer. The good doctor needed technically still needs repairing, because this foot is loose. What happened there was, I painted the joint because it was quite loose, and then when it came time to put the foot back on, it broke. The peg is no longer attached to that side of the leg. It's only held on because there's a screw going through to hold it in place. So it's held on by the other part, so it's still there, but it's still not how it should be. Yeah?
I do dry brushing quite regularly,
yes,
but I always seem to have it rub off. Is there anything I can do to counteract that?
What you want to do after dry brushing with any other sort of painting is varnish it afterwards.
Okay.
If you put some mild coat on it, or hairspray, or spray varnish, that will do the job. Yeah, I've actually... Oh, yeah. Just a second.
Oh, you're right. If you're doing any customs and something breaks, have you ever contacted any third parties to try and get replacement parts, or is that just a dead end?
I've not contacted third parties myself, but I have been in touch with Power Toys about sourcing replacement parts. Generally, they'll come through to you. Always go through your vendor as opposed to directly to the company.
Okay.
Unless if it's something rare, then yes, get in touch with them.
No, it was my Carl effects I did get from Power. Snapped the piece off during transformation.
Yeah, best bet would be to get in touch with Mastermind.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're about done for time, actually. So, have I got time for one more question?
Are we allowed to photograph these things?
Yeah. Farmer and Leo Zach are going to be in the display case tomorrow. If you want to quickly have a look at the other ones at the bar.